you're running one of the world's largest private school operators, and I'm sure you have spoken to many teachers throughout your lifetime and throughout your career, and you've seen their impact firsthand. Sure. But it becomes a bit tricky when you try to convince governments, organizations, even parents, that education is both an expenditure and an investment. So if we're talking pure numbers here, how do teachers contribute not only to individual earnings, but also to broader economic growth and then social cohesion as well?
If we were to look at the economic output of a teacher, it's interesting to look at it this way. So if we take a typical teacher, they work with, call it 100 to 200 students a year. A career teacher would potentially work for 30 years. The economic value of that single teacher in what you would call a lower sort of income GDP per capita country would be $300 million. You go to higher GDP per capita countries, this is one teacher, by the way. You're talking about economic contribution that would be in the billions.
Wow.
So if you start to think and aggregate the economic value of teachers across the board, in reality, you could be talking about hundreds of trillions of dollars in economic value that could be created for the world. But again, the economic imperative is pretty undeniable, but I always like to look at the intangibles, as it were. We live in a world where change is constant, connected, increasingly complex. The real constant for our young people, for our children, is frankly their values. These values give them a framework within which to make the right choices in a rapidly changing context. Almost without exception, it is a great teacher that is the central tenet or theme to developing the values in that young person.
Obviously, we see teachers in several countries around the world being so underpaid. How can we effectively calculate and communicate the economic value that teachers bring to society, both in terms of individual earnings and also broader economic growth, to governments and organizations that we're seeing in a lot of countries that really don't see it and really don't act on it?
No, absolutely. I think what Dino just mentioned is very important, how we consider the impact, the economic impact of teachers. Let me recall a few figures that are important. We are missing 44 million teachers today to achieve SDG 4. If we add to them early child education and care educators, we are missing around 50 million teachers. And that's a matter of concern for all of us. That means that there are children who are missing learning opportunities. Yeah. Recently, we calculated the cost of inaction, and I think it's very important. There is an economic argument to say how much you will earn, but it's also how much it will cost you. Yeah. The cost of deficit in skills, and that means children who drop out earlier, that means children who are not learning at the age where they are supposed to learn, is around $10 trillion per year.
Wow.
So that's a very important aspect, is that there is an economic cost if you don't invest in education and you don't invest in teachers. Again, some additional figures. We are missing $100 billion per year in terms of investment in education to achieve SDG 4. This is a calculation that we made recently. And the question, of course, when you bring it to teachers, is that in most cases, in most education system, 80%, 85% of the cost or of the budget goes to teachers. So the gap in investment means gaps in recruiting teachers and investing in teacher capacity development, investing in teachers' well-being, in working conditions, and that in a way leads to those what we are calling learning crisis. 250 million learners are out of school. Around 7 out of 10 children in low and middle income countries at age of 10 are not learning and are not able to read and understand a sentence. 770 million illiterate persons. So this trickles into a large learning crisis that we see around the world, and that has implications on the growth, on socioeconomic development, and on sustainable development, achieving all the SDGs.
Yeah, and what I would say is, while you were saying that there's many teachers that are missing or not in the market, is because they're not, maybe they're not getting the financial rewards, the appreciation, et cetera. I think that's a main reason. Abdullah, I can say that you're close to a genius. Did you really get 99.9% in your high school score, your graduation, ثانوية عامة?
Yeah, because I'm not a genius, but I was raised in a family that are investing all they have in education.
Wow.
All of my brothers and sisters, we all got the least degree we got is 98%.
Oh my God. I would say he's Egyptian. I'm Egyptian as well.
Yeah.
And our high school system is very difficult. So to get 99.9%, that's the first thing I saw. I had to mention.
And I'm not even in the top 100 student in Egypt with this degree.
We have some geniuses in our country, and I think it's also thanks to a lot of good teachers. So you're the founder of Science Street, which communicates scientific information in the form of video. So you're a new kind of teacher. You're a social media educator, or what's called an edu-tuber. Yeah, which is a completely new mix in measuring a teacher's impact and economic value. You're saying this alternative way of teaching has a bigger impact than a traditional way and is much cheaper. Tell us about that.
I'm not saying it's not a bigger impact. It's, at the end of the day, we are collaborating to make the impact. But if we are saying, like Mr. Dino said, that a teacher can teach 120 students, but if I'm self-speaking that at my channel, we are doing purely science, but in an entertainment way. We are putting the science informations between the reels and everything and all of the entertainment content on the social media. And at the end of the day, every year we do a different concept of science from their curriculum. And what we got, more than 100 million of students that are learning. So I say we are kind of an EOR, an educational open resources. I am in science, and there are enormous amounts of teachers that are doing English, Arabic, coding, programming. We are collaborating to give an equilibrium for people in educating. So not every family can invest in education, but you can invest in less than minimum dollars to give them an access for internet, and if they have access for internet, so they can have the same opportunities that another families like they got for their children and family. So we are collaborating with schools.
Yeah, and doing it in a very interesting way. I've seen your videos. Science was not my favorite subject growing up, but your videos are very entertaining and very interesting, and information, a lot of information in it. So congratulations to you. Dino, would you but integrate is the correct word, edu-tubers in schooling systems, because we're talking about technology here at the end of the day and a different way of teaching. Technology also is iPads in the newsroom. We're going to talk about that. I'm very iffy about that, but let's start with edu-tubers. Would you integrate?
Absolutely. I think the reality is that for education, we have an obligation, frankly, a responsibility to ensure that the curriculum that we provide to our young people, to our learners, is future relevant and future ready. There is an unacceptable lag today in curriculum provision between, call it, when innovation in industry happens and it actually reaches our education systems. So let me give you two very simple examples. Python, again, sort of very prevalent today, relatively dated sort of coding language, was developed by industry through the early 80s, through the late 80s. It reached our schools the mid-2000s. So you're talking about more than a quarter century between where innovation industry is sitting and our kids actually getting access to it from a learning perspective. So for me, absolutely. And the reality is, look, given the nature of the global teacher shortage, it may be the case that it is through artificial intelligence, machine learning, that we're actually able to attempt to reach some of the goals that we've set for ourselves in terms of SDG 4, whether it's virtual tutors, intelligent tutoring systems, personalized learning pathways, assessment tools. These will all be incredibly important, but what I'm certain of is that while the role of the teacher will change and must change, their ability to be able to nurture human potential will be enduring.
Very interesting. Dr. Borhene, we're talking about innovation, and you know, it's a rapid evolvement of technology in the education sector. There's a bit of worry about the role of teachers in all this rapid evolvement. So how do you ensure that teachers remain central while leveraging innovation to amplify their impact?
Indeed, I think there are 3 points that are very critical, and I've been listening to the discussion this afternoon. First, education is not only about learning mathematics or language. It's about identity building. It's about culture. It's about nation building. So I would be very careful in the substitution equation. I don't think the substitution equation works in this case. I think what colleagues are referring to, the integration, is the leveraging the potential, is technology in our terms, as we have put it last year in the global report on technology in education. It's in the terms of educators that technology has to serve. That's one important aspect. The second aspect is there is a tension between innovation and regulation. We know that there are issues that we have to regulate. For example, data. For example, the bias of algorithm. For example, cybersecurity, intrusion. So there are aspects that we need to regulate.
Yeah.
But we need to innovate. And I think that's what we need to do, is that if we regulate too much, we will prevent the innovation. If we innovate without regulation, we open doors for, I would say, bias and all the issues that we see with the artificial intelligence, with data. So there is an importance of innovation and regulation. And the last piece is about the capacity development.
Yeah.
If teachers are not trained to use the technology, to use the YouTube that is prepared, to use the open educational resources, to use AI. And today there is almost a race between teachers and learners. Learners are, in some cases, better equipped in terms of using technology than teachers. So we need to invest in teacher training. We need to invest in also the confidence that we build in teachers in terms of their role as teacher, as mentor, as facilitator, as actor that play an important role in education. And let me finish with in our report last year on the teacher shortages, we have made 3 recommendations that are important. One is teachers' working conditions, material. Is working conditions, is salaries, is career development, is very important. The second is about the symbolic valorization of teachers, how society valorizes teachers. And the third is that many of the reforms and policy, and some of ministers left, but many of the reforms in the countries are not designed with teachers. Sometimes teachers feel that they are designed against teachers.
Yeah.
So that how you ensure that policy dialogue, the social dialogue, so the teacher feels that they are valorized also as an actor, not just as an executor, is something that we will have to take into.
How can teachers, traditional and digital, retain their value, in your view, and remain relevant? I mean, you've used very creative ways to create your videos to teach, but you also use technology. Before we get into that, I just wanted to know the value of a teacher in your view. How can a teacher learn of their value and show society their value, as Dr. Borhene was saying?
Yeah, thank you for this question. I see the teacher is the mirror of the future of the country, of any nation. You see how your teacher is well equipped, you will see how is your future, and because he will teach his students. So if we are speaking about the alternative way of teaching, and I'm not agree with this term, because we are a tool, we are an equipment for the main teacher, because he will be the core of the teaching or the learning process in the country, so we can collaborate. The teacher now, all the students and all the new generation, now we are in the first seconds of the generation of the AI. They get not only access of every piece of information on the internet, but they will have an agent that will analyze and give them actions and everything. So the teacher should have a role of how to navigate all of this information, how to teach them, how to critical think, how to analyze, how to take a decision, how to even have a good and emotional relationship with this information, because it all starts with emotions. If we are loving some substance or subjects, you will go deeper and go further in this subject. But if you're not loving, if you have any emotion with it, you will not have any relation with.
And the second part of my question is, I mean, in your view, how do you think we can scale this idea of edutubers, social media teachers, and scale the use of technology in teaching?
Yeah, I guess it's a government rule here, and we have a previous experience with the Ministry of Education at Egypt. I do what I do of Science Street and doing science, but we had an amazing collaboration. We made a program called Al-Mukhtabar and Al-Mukhtabar Challenge. It was a session for every governmental school, and also it's free. Our education in Egypt government is free. They got a session, one per week. It's a must to watch. And now we have a good science. Over the 4 years, we have a more degrees and a more pass rate for the students. If it's not, it's just a correlation, not a causation, but it has an impact. So the government should give an access for students, because it's a small fraction of the big investment in a big teacher. It's just invested in a good content to edutubing students and to equip teachers in the classes. It will make a great impact.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up government investment. Dino, my question to you was, in your view, in what ways can governments and policymakers shift their perspective to view education spending, particularly on teachers, as an investment rather than an expenditure?
Look, I think perspectives are certainly starting to change, because there is so much data available. You've got the ability to be able to compare the performance of your nation's human capital against one another. I mean, we all, look to the OECD assessments, and we look at TIMSS and PISA. So countries have a really good sense of, are they able to truly create value and compete in the global marketplace? So for me, the data now is incredibly accessible, and frankly, all it requires, and I remember one of the panelists in one of the earlier sessions talking about humility, all it requires is a level of humility. You have all the information to hand.
But how do you think the steps that governments and stakeholders can take to maximize, let's say, the return on investment? So the numbers that very shocking that you said in the beginning of the session, how can you make them see that this is the return on investment and in real time?
The nature of the challenge, look, we're going to have 850 million more learners just in the K-12 system in the next 10 years. That scale of the challenge that lies before us is so significant that, frankly, I don't think people can rest on the laurels of whether it's government's role to do this or private sector's role to do this, the NGO space. We're going to have to be able to unlock some really powerful collaborations between government, the NGO, the private sector, in order to try and, deliver the results that we frankly need.
Thank you so much, Dino. I think our time is up, unfortunately, but that's a great way to end our session. Thanking our panelists for this insightful session, everyone. Thank you so much.